Okay, so welcome. We're doing a deep dive today, really digging into some recent reports and sources, like a piece from Reuters,
hmm
and they're all focused on NATO's defense needs, how they seem to be changing, and specifically Germany's part in that.
Right, and the challenges Germany faces, the sources frame all this around, the perceived threat from Russia.
Exactly. So our mission really is just to pull out the core facts, the figures, the timelines that are actually in this material.
Yeah, cut through the noise so you can get a clear picture of what these reports are actually saying
Yeah.
is shifting in European security and why they argue it's important now.
Okay. So, first big thing jumping out from these sources, NATO seems to be planning a major ramp up.
That's right. The alliance is apparently looking for a significant boost in military capability from member states.
How significant are we talking?
Well, Reuters, citing their sources, projects the total number of brigades needed could go up to somewhere between 120 and 130.
Wow, 120 to 130. The current target's 80, right?
Yeah, so that's potentially, what, a 50% increase, roughly? A substantial jump.
Okay, 50%. And the sources then zoom in on Germany. They're apparently being asked for 7 extra brigades.
7 additional ones, yes, that is the figure mentioned, which could mean something like 40,000 troops just from Germany, on top of what they're already doing.
That seems like a huge number, especially given where Germany is now.
It is. They currently field 8 brigades. There's a ninth being set up for Lithuania that's supposed to be ready by 2027.
Right. And didn't they already commit to like 10 brigades by 2030 back in 2021?
They did. So this asks for essentially 7 more on top of that existing plan. Well, the sources definitely paint that as a major challenge.
And I guess that leads straight into the personnel issue, doesn't it? The reports really highlight this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's sort of the crux of the problem described, finding an extra 40,000 troops. That's a tough ask.
Especially when, according to these reports, the Bundeswehr hasn't even hit its 2018 staffing goal.
Correct. The goal was 203,000 active personnel. The sources say they're currently short by around 20,000 troops.
20,000 short now. And the historical comparison the sources make is pretty stark, too.
It really is. You look back at the Cold War, West Germany alone had, what, 500,000 active troops?
Yeah.
Plus 800,000 reservists.
Huge difference. And now, unified Germany is meant to be this key rapid response force, especially on the eastern flank with Poland.
Exactly, but with the very different personnel numbers outlined in these sources.
So if they're short on people, how do the sources say Germany plans to meet these potential new demands?
Well, they mentioned the German defense minister, Carsten Breuer, has set a target. He's directed the forces to aim for full staffing by 2029.
2029. Okay, that date seems important in these reports.
It does, because the sources explicitly link that 2029 target date to NATO's own estimate
Estimate for what?
for when Russia might potentially have rebuilt its military enough to, possibly attack alliance territory. That linkage in the material really sharpens the focus on timelines.
Right. And the money side is also in these reports. Defense spending.
Yeah, there's been a general increase across NATO since 2022. And the material suggests the Secretary General might push for doubling the current benchmark.
Doubling from 2% of GDP to 4%. Or even higher.
The number floated in the material is potentially aiming for 5% of GDP.
5%.
And Germany's position on that.
Well, the sources report Germany has already eased its own debt rules to allow for more defense spending, and they've apparently indicated support for that potential 5% target.
So the financial levers seem to be moving, at least according to this material. But the personnel gap remains the big issue described.
It seems to be the central challenge highlighted, yes, even with the financial commitment potentially aligning.
Are there concrete things Germany is doing now mentioned in the sources, besides planning?
Yes, the deployment to Lithuania is detailed, that tank brigade. Strengthening the eastern flank presence, the reports keep emphasizing.
How many troops are there now? The material notes around 400 German troops currently, with plans to increase that to 500 by the end of this year. Training starting, expected to ramp up.
Okay, so that shows the context driving this, the perceived threat is leading to actual deployments described in the sources.
Right. And that context, the perceived threat from Russia, underpins everything in these reports. They cite a previous Bundeswehr assessment suggesting Russia is actively preparing.
Preparing for what, specifically?
For a potential large-scale conflict with NATO, driven, the assessment suggests, by a belief that Putin intends to use force.
And there's another timeline perspective mentioned, right, from Lithuania.
Yes, Lithuanian President Nasuda's comments, as reported. He suggested an attack could potentially happen within just a few years.
How many years?
He indicated Lithuania might have about 4 to 5 years to prepare, which again brings these different potential timelines into focus.
The sources also mentioned recent Russian actions in the Baltic.
Mm-hmm. Increased surveillance of NATO activities, shows of force, provocations, that's all noted in the material as part of the current picture.
Okay, so pulling these threads together from the sources, it sounds like the alliance, and Germany very specifically, are portrayed as undertaking a fundamental rethink.
Definitely. Pushing for more troops, more spending, forward deployments, and it's all presented as being driven by this security picture centered on Russia and these potential timelines.
So for you listening, why do these details matter? These specific numbers from the sources, the 120, 130 brigades, Germany needing perhaps 40,000 more troops, the current 20,000 shortfall, that potential 5% spending target, the troop numbers in Lithuania, the different timelines.
These are the specifics from the reports that really illustrate the scale and what the sources portray as the urgency of these shifts.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it, between these ambitious military goals described in the reports and the practical hurdles.
Especially personnel.
Yeah.
And meeting these goals within certain timeframes. That tension is clear in the source material.
Exactly. So, based purely on what's laid out in these sources we've discussed, here's a final thought for you to consider. We heard the material mentions Germany's goal is full staffing by 2029.
Right.
And we also heard the sources cite the Lithuanian president suggesting maybe only 4 to 5 years to prepare for a potential conflict, a timeline that could end around 2028 or 2029.
Those two dates presented in the material.
So how do those different target dates, both highlighted in these reports, relate to each other in the overall security situation depicted by these sources?